In Colombia, social organizations marched to ratify their solidarity and support for President Gustavo Petro. In El Salvador, Supreme Electoral Tribunal Magistrate Guillermo Wellman said that it is not possible to annul the presidential and legislative elections of February 4th after the right-wing Republican Nationalist Alliance warned of an appeal to repeat the elections. Pakistan closes its election day on Thursday with 12 people killed in the southwest and northwest part of the country. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Colombia, social organizations marched to ratify their solidarity and support for President Gustavo Petro and against the institutional breakdown promoted by sectors of the extreme right wing. Thursday's event was called by political, worker, indigenous and farmer movements. During the mobilization, the citizens reiterated their support to the administration of the Colombian head of state, Gustavo Petro, while demanding warranties for the union and social movement. They also called for compliance with the constitutional mandate to appoint the new Attorney General and respect for democracy and the people's decision to elect a democratic and progressive government. In the southern Colombian city of Cali, the day of demonstrations began in the morning hours, heading to the center of the city and with the aim of demonstrating their support for President of Colombia. The demonstrators also demanded the election of a new Attorney General and rejected the actions of the current head of the public ministry against the stability and peace of Colombia. Amid these mobilizations, the Supreme Court of Justice failed to select a new Attorney General. After 2 rounds of voting, none of the 3 candidates proposed by the President Gustavo Petro obtained the required majority. This determination means that the Deputy Attorney General, Marta Mancera, will take over as Acting Attorney General as of Tuesday, February 13th. She will remain in office until the full court elects a new Attorney General. Any of these candidates receive at least 16 votes in order to be chosen, so the election was postponed to next February 22nd. In this context, President Petro denounced that infiltrators in the mobilizations harassed the headquarters of the Supreme Court where the vote for the new prosecutor was underway. The court did not decide, so the controversial deputy prosecutor Marta Mancera is the prosecutor in charge as of today. The head of the corporation denounced the siege, which has already been condemned by the head of the state. In El Salvador, the magistrate of the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, Guillermo Wellman, said this Wednesday that it is not possible to nullify the presidential and legislative elections of February 4th. The magistrate Guillermo Wellman ratified that it is impossible to declare null and void the elections that favor the re-election of President Nayib Bukele. Although more than 72 hours have elapsed since the closing of the polling stations, the definitive result of the electoral process is still unknown. A series of irregularities denounced by political parties and citizens forced the electoral body to order the manual counting of the tally sheets. However, far from clearing up doubts, this decision and the facts known in the last hours have worsened them. The magistrate added that this would be like playing with the population and that it is necessary to respect the people who turn out to vote massively.
We have security guards and heads of polling stations in the most important cities and in the most important voting centers, and there we have been able to see just that. So with all these irregularities and with everything that is happening and the signs that we see of wanting to disrupt a result that perhaps is not favorable, we believe that we really have to consider repeating the election, because it is not only what happened in the election day. We spent 48 hours without having certainty of where or how 2 electoral packages were being guarded.
On Wednesday, the government of Argentina, after the failure in parliament, announced that presidential mandates, such as the so-called omnibus law, could be submitted to popular consultation. Despite the fact that the ruling party in the Chamber of Deputies decided to return the bill of President Javier Milei to the commissions, the government spokesman Manuel Adorni referred to the possibility of a plebiscite. In Argentina, plebiscites can be binding or non-binding, and in order for them to be binding, they must also be approved by the legislator. In this sense, Adorni said that if they were not approved, it would be holding back the Argentina of the future.
It seems to me that the validation has to be done by the people or by whoever is interested in doing it. Of course, to see who has effectively betrayed the vote of the people. The law will become a reality at some point. The politicians will realize what the people ask for, what the people want to. In short, at some point, the law will become a reality. Evidently, they are not yet seeing or do not perceive what the country requires.
And with teleSUR, you can now celebrate one of the largest festivals in the South American continent. Gladys Quesada brings you all the details in this Carnival Time 2024. Tune in every day this week at 7 p.m. Caracas time through our Facebook Live at teleSUR English Official and X account at teleSUR English and discover our most colorful celebrations. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. Palestinian authorities report dozens of dead and wounded in recent hours after an Israeli bombardment on the Gaza towns of Rafah and Khan Yunis. The Palestinian government announces that in addition to the shelling and raids by the occupation forces, Israel has placed snipers in the vicinity of one of the main hospitals in Khan Yunis. The authorities indicated that the Israeli artillery also fired dozens of rockets at the eastern areas of that city, which has been the epicenter of a ground offensive by the occupation army. On the other hand, the international community has expressed its concern over Israel's orders to continue the raids on Rafah, where about 1.5 million people are currently sheltering. Amid the Israeli siege, Palestinian authorities denounced that at least 10,000 cancer patients are suffering the consequences of the raids of the occupying forces and the aggression against the health system, including lack of medical care and medicines. The Turkish-Palestinian Friendship Hospital in Gaza was providing care to these patients, but ceased to work after the Israeli attacks. On the other hand, the World Health Organization said that Israel has restricted requests for medical treatment abroad since 2021. Volker Turk, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, emphasizes that the Israeli forces are destroying all the buildings in the Gaza Strip that are near the fence that delimits Israel from Gaza.
The Israeli Defense Forces are reportedly destroying all buildings in the Gaza Strip that are within a kilometer of the Israel-Gaza fence, clearing the area with the objective of creating a buffer zone. Destructions carried out to create a buffer zone for general security purposes do not appear consistent with the narrow military operations exceptions that are set out in international humanitarian law. Extensive destruction of property not justified by military necessity and carried out unlawfully and wantonly amounts to a grave breach of the Fourth Geneva Convention and a war crime.
In this context, the Commissioner added that there has already been widespread destruction and demolition of large-scale civilian infrastructure, including residential buildings, schools, universities, in non-combat areas. This will result in the displacement of more people.
Since October, my office has recorded widespread destruction and demolition by the IDF of civilian and other infrastructure, including residential buildings, schools and universities in areas in which fighting is not or no longer taking place. Israel has not provided clear reasons for such extensive destruction of civilian infrastructure. Such destruction of homes and other essential civilian infrastructure also results in the displacement of communities that were living in these areas and appears to be aimed at or has the effect of rendering the return of civilians to these areas impossible. I remind the authorities that forcible transfer of civilians may constitute a war crime.
In Lebanon, the Islamic resistance movement Hezbollah reported the attack on 2 Israeli military bases in the north of the occupied lands. In a statement issued Thursday, the Lebanese resistance declared that it carried out an attack on Israeli positions in the occupied territories in support of the people and the resistance in the Gaza Strip and in revenge for the Israeli army's continuous aggressions against targets in southern Lebanon. According to the note, Lebanese Hezbollah fighters in 2 separate operations struck with appropriate weapons the Branik barracks and the 769th headquarters in Kiryat Shermona near the border with southern Lebanon. Israeli media indicate that Hezbollah targeted sensitive areas and therefore Israeli authorities urged settlers to seek shelter for fear of new attacks by the Lebanese resistance. In Egypt, the Arab League rejected Argentina's President Javier Milei's intention to move his country's embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The alliance's Secretary General Ahmed Aboulgate considered the action a violation of international law that undermines the chances of achieving a just peace on the basis of the two-state solution. He stressed that the United Nations Security Council Resolution 478 emphasizes that all Israeli actions in Jerusalem are invalid and must be cancelled. It also calls on countries to refrain from relocating their diplomatic headquarters from Tel Aviv. In southwestern Iceland, a volcano erupted on Thursday for the 3rd time since December, spewing lava into the sky and triggering the evacuation of the Blue Lagoon Spa, one of the island nation's biggest tourist attractions. According to the Meteorological Office of Iceland, the eruption began around 6 a.m. local time along a 3-kilometer fissure northeast of Mount Sudunkur. The site is about 4 kilometers northeast of Grindavik, a coastal town of 3,800 people evacuated before an early eruption on December 18th. The Meteorological Office also added that lava was flowing westward and there was no immediate threat to Grindavik, nor to a major power plant in the area. This is the 3rd eruption since December of a volcanic system on the Reykjanes Peninsula, which is home to Keflavik, Iceland's main airport, and several large cities.
During the last nearly 800 years, this area was dormant on land. There were a few eruptions in the sea just off the peninsula, but on land nothing happened for nearly 800 years. And in that time, the rest of Iceland experienced probably getting on for 150, 200 eruptions. So naturally, people thought this area was fairly safe. And so they started building, and you've got a number of important towns in the area. And it's been a bit of a shock that this has come back to life, especially when people realize that the past evidence that we gathered only quite recently is that eruptions could go on for decades, if not centuries, sporadically in this particular peninsula.
We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In France, workers of the Paris Autonomous Transport Administration demanded better working conditions on Thursday. Maintenance workers of this administration, known for being the largest public transport company in Paris, took over the headquarters of the entity during a protest on Thursday. The protesters demand a wage increase of €300, equivalent to $324, as well as improvements in working conditions. The agency's administration has stated that a system has been established to strengthen communications with representatives of the Transport Workers Union. On Thursday, Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping highlighted the strong diplomatic ties between both of their countries via phone call. Russian presidential aide Yuri Kushavok declared on Thursday's briefing that China and Russia are planning to continue joint energy projects this year. He added that Putin and Xi spoke about building financial infrastructure that ensures reliability of payments, while Moscow and Beijing have increasingly carried out trade in rubles and yuan. During the call, the two leaders discussed the conflict in Ukraine and the intensification of the aggressions by the Tel Aviv army against the inhabitants of the Gaza Strip. Both leaders confirm a common approach and seek to work towards a more just world order based on international law. The government of China encourages the Philippines to not interfere in its internal affairs after Manila increased its military presence on an island near Taiwan. The Ministry of Affairs stated that this type of situation represents a red flag for the People's Republic of China. The Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Wenbin stated that Beijing and Manila should seek to establish friendly relations based on territorial integrity and the non-interference in each country's internal affairs. The decision to increase the military presence on the island comes at a time of growing tensions due to the territorial disputes in the maritime area, a strategic trade corridor in which both nations have overlapping interests. Pakistan closes its election day on Thursday with 12 people killed in the southwest and northwest part of the country. The Pakistani army announced in a statement that 51 terrorist attacks took place mostly on Thursday. According to the statement, 10 of the 12 people killed were members of the security and law enforcement forces, while there were 39 others injured. More than 180 million Pakistanis were to choose 266 representatives of the National Assembly among 17,000 candidates, in addition to the representatives of the provincial chambers and the members of the government. The electoral process has been under controversy when the leader of the Pakistan Justice Movement, former Prime Minister Imran Khan, was sentenced to 10 years in prison, a ruling that his supporters claim was to prevent him from coming to power. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, at least 350 Ugan-Bukali militia members handed in their weapons to the authorities of the Department of Chopo. According to the provincial administration of Ubundu, the disarming took place in 2 operations which included 10 women. The weapons were locally manufactured and publicly burned by the authorities. The provincial Minister of Interior and Security declared that all members of the militia were identified and authorized to return to their places of residence, and that the hierarchy would decide on the reintegration process. We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia.